Hey everybody, welcome back. We've been hurricaned thoroughly with Beryl coming through last week. Most of Houston's been out of power for the last few weeks, so I want to say thank you to all of those of you who reached out to be concerned enough to ask how we were doing and if we were okay. My team and I are all okay. Everybody's back in power and no one was hurt. So again, thanks for that. Now, Tuesday, we talked about protein. If you didn't get an opportunity to watch that show, it's the most comprehensive show you'll ever watch on the topic of protein, symptoms of deficiency, why you need protein, why it's so critical and important, how you can get more protein, what kind of mechanism is involved in the digestion of protein, and how protein plays a role in immune function and hair growth and joint health and everything else you can imagine. So if you haven't watched that show, highly recommend you go back and watch it. So we're going to try to answer your protein questions today. So those of you who are tuning in, maybe you're new to the show, this is a live Q&A format. So as you type in your questions, I'm going to do my best to get those questions answered. But we're going to try to keep it as protein oriented as we can. I know you all have a lot of questions about health and nutrition, and maybe they don't all pertain to protein, but I'm going to take protein questions first. So let's dive into your questions. So Vijaya says, is it enough if we try to get it from plant-based protein powder? To what extent it might help in reducing antibodies or healing thyroid gland in patients with Hashimoto? So talking about protein and Hashimoto's, can you get enough protein from plant-based powders? You can get adequate protein in terms of total quantity of grams necessary per day for your body's recommendations from plant-based proteins. Especially if you're talking about something like our warrior protein, where you're taking it in, and it's actually has a high amino acid ratio profile, so that you're getting all the key amino acids that you need. So the answer is yes, you can use plant-based protein powders to achieve a greater level of protein in your diet. As far as how that relates to your thyroid, one of the biggest parts of how it relates to your thyroid is specifically the amino acid tyrosine. Tyrosine is in protein, so think of it as you eat protein-containing foods, you're going to get some degree of tyrosine in those foods, and tyrosine is what makes thyroid hormone. So when we talk about T4, that hormone that doctors call thyroxine or thyroid hormone, that backbone of that hormone is tyrosine, which comes from protein. So we see this a lot in people, especially in the vegan or vegetarian crowd, where they're eating a lot of processed vegetarian foods that are low in protein as the staples of their diet. So they're not getting enough protein, they're not getting enough tyrosine, and their thyroid start to fail them. So you definitely want to get protein in adequate quantities. You want to make sure you're getting adequate tyrosine as it relates to the thyroid gland itself. Let's see here. Let's see. If you deprived yourself, Linda says, if you deprived yourself of adequate protein for several years, can you make up for it? And if so, how? Yeah. If you've eaten a low protein diet for several years, can you make up for it? Of course you can. Start eating enough. And how? Eat more. So I gave some formulaic equations to you in Tuesday's show. I'll kind of repeat that. So if you're trying to increase your protein and get a higher protein diet, you kind of try to get a minimum of about 1.5, 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you're in the US and you use pounds, you take your body weight, in kilograms divided by 2.2, and that gives you pounds, or vice versa. And so that's how you can do the math for yourself, for your weight, and you can figure out how much protein you need to be consuming. Could you talk about extra nutritional needs for the elderly? So one of the biggest needs for the elderly is protein. We see there's a term being thrown around in medicine today. It's called sarcopenia. Sarcopenia, P-E-N-I-A, refers to age-related muscle loss. So sarcopenia. And it's not age-related at all. It's age-associated, meaning that we're calling it age-related because as people get older, they tend to eat less, they tend to exercise less, and their body has taken on the toll of the damage and we'll just say the neglect of the host over time. That's not age. that's more neglect over time. So nutritional needs of the elderly, maintain your protein levels at adequate quantities, no less really than 1 gram per kilogram of body weight of protein per day of lean mass. Now, if you're 300 pounds and you're 200 pounds overweight, you wouldn't use that same equation. You're taking your lean mass where your body weight is supposed to be, and you're using those numbers to get your protein intake. But making sure the elderly need to make sure they eat enough protein. You'll notice a lot of the trash companies that are out there making liquid drinks. They started making them for kids, for picky kids, and so they would create these protein drinks for kids that number 1 ingredient was corn syrup, number 2 ingredient sugar, number 3 ingredient some crappy protein from soy, genetically modified soy garbage, right? And then they put all these artificial flavors and sweeteners in them so that kids will love to drink them. Well, they're now doing that for adults because of sarcopenia. And so they're throwing out these products like Ensure is an example of one of these products. Horrible product. Go look at the food label, look at the ingredient label on that product. And it's not anything I would even feed to my dog. I mean, my dog eats better than a lot of these, especially these patients in hospitals that are being given those types of drinks as an attempt to call it nutrition. But we could do an elderly nutrition show another time in like a more full-blown course. So there's a comment here that I need to correct. Rice and beans are a complete protein that does not require electricity for refrigeration. No, that is incorrect. It's not incorrect that rice and beans don't require refrigeration. It is incorrect to call rice and beans a complete protein. They are absolutely not a complete protein. Let's define what complete protein means. A complete protein refers to a food source that contains all of the essential amino acids. There are 10 of them, 10 essential amino acids. So if we're going to call a protein complete, then that food needs to contain all 10 essential amino acids. If a food does not contain all 10, then it is called an incomplete protein. And so there is no plant, rice, beans, or any other type of plant matter or material that is a complete protein. The only complete proteins that we have are animal proteins. And that would be meat, dairy is a complete protein, eggs are a complete protein. So those 3 are complete. All vegetables, legumes, pulses, etc., are incomplete proteins. Now that doesn't mean you can't eat those things. It just simply means let's not call them complete proteins because they do not provide all the essential amino acids to sustain human life. Remember, an essential amino acid means your body dies without it. So you have to make sure that you eat it every day. I sustained a trimalar ankle fracture on 12/21, 6 surgeries. Let's see. Oxidative stress last week, COVID, how much protein? Okay, so you had a fracture, you had 6 surgeries, you were diagnosed with a COVID infection last week. How much protein should I eat? In other words, you're trying to recover from both surgeries, fracture, as well as a cold, basically. Then you need to be at that 2 grams, a much higher amount, right? 2 grams per kilogram of lean body mass weight would be kind of an ideal amount to increase your protein to help you overcome. So do your calculation. And if you're trying to also, we have a surgery recovery protocol, a nutritional surgical recovery protocol. You should check that out. It's we'll put a link in the feed for you. You can go check it out and read more about it. But these are specific nutrients that I've handpicked based on my experience, where people can go and take these to help support their ability to recover more effectively after surgery, trauma, burns, any type of major injury that you've had. I see you support 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. What do you think of 1 gram protein per pound of body weight? It's approximately similar, just. And do you think it could potentially cause generalized hair thinning? No, too much protein I've never seen too much protein cause general hair thinning. I have seen not enough protein cause hair thinning for sure. I mean, your hair's made from protein. If you don't eat enough protein per day, which will be the consequence for your body? Christina, watch our Tuesday show. I did an hour and a half on the consequences of not eating enough protein. But for starters, your immune system tanks, your muscle mass tanks, your resiliency tanks, your ability to navigate the environment. You become more weak. You lose your range of motion. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that can happen if you don't eat enough protein consistently. Does MSG affect the protein content in foods? No, MSG is just junk and you shouldn't eat it, but it doesn't necessarily affect the content of protein in foods, although I would say that if a food contains MSG, then the quality of the protein in that food is probably also going to be of poor quality. So as an example, Claudia, we see a lot of products, they're protein powder products that contain MSG for flavoring, and the source of the protein in the powder, like the protein powder, if we're talking about a supplement, it's either like a hydrolyzed protein, so it's been subjected to massive amounts of heat. It's usually like a soy protein from GMO soy, or it's some type of hydrolyzed or processed dairy from unhealthy cows, not from your A2 grass-fed free range cows, but from your feedlot cows that are being pumped full of GMO grains and glyphosate. So those types of protein I don't recommend. That's what you find in a lot of the GNC and other health food vitamin shops where they're using it's very lucrative in the supplement realm to use crappy, poor quality protein sources and mark them up extremely high and profit from them. And so a lot of people don't know what they're looking for to buy in a protein supplement. But if you're looking for a high quality protein supplement, ideally avoid, if you see the word hydrolyzed casein or hydrolyzed dairy, not good. If you see the word soy protein or soy protein isolate, or even the word isolate, when you get into that terminology, it just ups the processing of that protein, and it denatures the protein. The protein is less quality, and it actually, in many cases, I see it cause a lot of gastrointestinal inflammation and GI upset in people trying to take them. Let's see here. Is organic soy the best source of plant-based protein? Is it bad for the thyroid? It can be. You can overdo soy protein. I'm not a big fan of soy protein. If you're going to use a soy-based type of protein, organic miso or tofu would be better options, in my opinion, than the processed protein powders. If you're looking for a plant-based protein powder, pea's a pretty good option, Terry, in that regard. You might check out our Warrior Protein. I've graduated to a maintenance program after 1 year of supplements supporting no whole grain diet. That doesn't make sense. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me. Okay, so let's say that again. I have graduated to a maintenance program after 1 year of supplements supporting no whole grain diet. So you're not eating any whole grains, is the way I am reading that. Should I buy your Ultra Nutrients or multi-nutrient supplement for maintaining vitamin and mineral health? It's a great start, Robert. Our multi-nutrients or our Ultra Nutrients, we're out of stock right now on Ultra Nutrients, but our multi-nutrients has 40 essential vitamins, minerals, and cofactors in it that could be, extremely helpful in your endeavor to try to maintain great nutrition. I take it every day. It is something I use every day. There's 2 supplements I use every day without fail: my omega-3 fish oil, and then my multivitamin. And then beyond that, it just depends on what I'm trying to accomplish differently. So there's a lot of different reasons a person might want to supplement with different things, but those are 2 very hardcore staples that I use personally every day. Having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, is taking collagen going to help me? Will my body be able to metabolize and utilize it? Yes, your body will be able to metabolize and utilize it, but you're not going to reverse Ehlers-Danlos by taking collagen. One of the best things you can do for Ehlers-Danlos is get your vitamin and mineral status checked, because there are a number of nutrient deficiencies that can exacerbate EDS, but also you would want to Make sure that you're strengthening your muscles, because in Ehlers-Danlos, your joints are going to tend to be dislocated much more easily because of elasticity in your ligaments. And so if you can strengthen and shore up your muscles, you're going to use your muscles more as a barrier of protection from that happening to you. So, but you have to be careful not to lift too heavy, because you lift too heavy with EDS, you can also put a joint out of alignment, or you can put a joint out of its socket. So, band exercises, body weight calisthenics, at slow reps with emphasis on the negative movement is going to be an important aspect, in my opinion, for those with Ehlers-Danlos. After a frustrating few years of dietary changes not really working, God pointed me to you, and I have crawled back and all the way grain-free, and the edema in my legs is pretty much all gone. Love it. High five. Does L-glutamine cause sleep disorders? Typically, no. I mean, sleep disorders have a lot of different causes. Hamid, you might want to watch my show on sleep disorders and on sleep. But L-glutamine is typically not something that is going to contribute to poor sleep. Some people are really ultra sensitive to glutamine, and it might give you some stimulus, so taking it earlier in the day versus later in the day, but it's not going to cause a sleep disorder. There's a myth going around that low-carb, high-fat community that eating high-protein, unused aminos get turned into fat and stored. How does that explain rabbit starvation in the long run? It's not false, but it's also not true. What can happen is, one of the things your body's really pretty smart. It can take protein and it can turn that protein into stored energy as well. Protein is also insulinogenic, meaning that it can stimulate your insulin levels to go up. So protein, and a lot of the people in the low carb, high fat community don't understand that protein is insulinogenic and can cause an increase in storage. But it's just not a simple answer, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. Because if you only eat protein from super lean sources like rabbit, as an example, yes, you will starve to death and you will waste. The people in the low carb, high fat diet aren't doing that. Nobody's thriving or surviving off of rabbit meat. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but going high protein, low carb, high fat isn't a right move for everyone. That community, there's a lot of folks in that community that feel better because they have done that. And there are some people that they do better on a ketogenic diet over time. And there are some people that don't. And I think there are unique biochemical differences between us all. One of the best things that you can do is try to determine what your fuel ratio, so to speak, your carb fat protein ratios need to be. I like to start people out on what I call the rule of thirds: a third carb, a third fat, a third protein. We start there. We may find and we may manipulate people as time goes on, because some people do better a little bit higher protein, a little bit lower carb. Some people do better a little bit higher fat. And some people do a little bit better, a little bit higher carb, a little bit lower fat. So it just depends. You might also have surgeries that impact your digestion and absorption. And so if you've had your gallbladder removed, higher fat diets might be more exacerbatory, to other types of symptoms. If you've had bariatric surgery, high protein, it might be a little bit harder to digest that high protein. So there are nuances to answering that question. It's not a one size fits all. The nail beds on my left hand have brown discoloration. If it's a brown discoloration, I would look at the potential for heavy metal. It's very common to see the brown discoloration in the nail beds being different types of toxic metals in your environment that you're being exposed to. What's the difference between animal protein versus vegetable protein besides its amino acid content? I mean, that is the main difference. And that's a huge difference. Like, let's not understate the variety of different amino acids from animal protein to plant-based protein. It's very hard to survive and thrive purely on vegetable protein with no animal source at all. That's not to say it can't be done, but I'm saying thrive, not just survive. I know there's a lot of rhetoric, and there's some documentaries that are out there on how they were trying to show that strongmen competition and bodybuilders who were only plant-based were breaking records. And most of that's lies and nonsense. To be the strongest and to be at your best, I would say, in my experience with athletics and athletic performance, which is pretty extensive, you have to have animal protein in your diet. Again, this isn't an attack on people that want to be on a plant-based diet. I'm just trying to give you kind of a general guide. Why do you feel there's a fear of protein in some diet camps? The fear of the protein comes really mainly from the posture and policy that the governments have adopted. In the U.S., most of the nutrition, or not most, but a lot of the nutrition policy comes from the Seventh-day Adventist camp. A lot of the influence of registered dietitians as a group was this early Seventh-day Adventist. Dr. Kellogg was a Seventh-day Adventist, and so they really forged and formed a lot of the early policy. Then also politics formed a lot of the early policy because they wanted to sell you cheap food. The government wanted to be able to subsidize grain. In other words, take tax dollars to grow more grain because they wanted a surplus of grain, because you can export grain and you can make it and you can profit from it. So if we tell everybody how healthy it is, then you're going to eat more of it, right? And so there was this mantra, eat cereal, and to eat cereal grains and whole grains. And then there was this demonization in the early 1900s of animal meat as a contributing factor, particularly saturated fat as a contributing factor to heart disease, without any valid science. So there's never been any great validity to the science behind, or no great studies that show that animal meat or animal proteins cause or contribute to disease in humans. Now, what we do have is some humans eating crappy animal, excuse my language, but bad animal protein. If you take a cow and feed it unhealthily, and you put it in a state where it can't graze, and it's stuck in a pen, and it's pooping and peeing all over itself and the other cows, and they're basically living in manure and urine and being fed genetically modified grains that are contaminated with pesticide, they're not going to be healthy animals. And if you eat those animals, you're not going to be a healthy human. And that's not the same thing as saying if I eat grass-fed, grass-finished meat, that's not healthy, right? So we have to look at the quality of where the food is sourced from. It's the same thing with plants. If you eat plants that are doused with pesticides, I mean, you're going to run a risk of those pesticides contributing to problems. So we look at the quality of the food first. But early in the 1900s, meat was being demonized as a trigger for heart disease because of the attack on saturated fat. And then as we progressed through the 1900s, we saw the whole war against cholesterol. And so that whole myth about cholesterol causing heart disease, which is very much a myth. We now know that people that have the highest cholesterol live longer. And we now have 50 years of empirical data where the top 2 prescribed drugs in the United States are drugs that lower cholesterol. And as a result of using those drugs since the early 80s, we do not have less heart disease. We don't have less cancer or strokes. We don't have less cardiovascular risks or complications, despite lowering cholesterol. So we now officially know empirically that lowering cholesterol absolutely does nothing for a person's health, and that there might actually be health detriment as a result of it. And that just because you eat meat doesn't necessarily mean, if your cholesterol goes up, that you're somehow at risk for developing, again, more disease. So a lot of that early policy, the grain being subsidized and being recommended beyond it, in my opinion, beyond its health. That's why I wrote No Grain, No Pain, or one of the reasons why I wrote No Grain, No Pain. The meat being demonized for the cholesterol theory and the saturated fat theory of increased risk for heart disease, which both are really quite false and untrue. And then you have the profitability of just using grain as a subsidy and selling grain very cheap. Like, I mean, a box of cereal, from a cereal manufacturer perspective, a box of cereal costs pennies to make, but they sell these boxes of cereal for upwards of $10 a box. I mean, so it's a highly profitable markup on a very poor quality, poor nutritionally dense food. I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of deviated there, but protein. There's another reason why protein is being demonized today, and that has to do. We can thank Bill Gates for that, because he's buying up a lot of farmland and he's planning on making a lot of protein, from poor quality soy and other grains. And so they're promoting the health of those things, and they're saying, don't eat the meat. We want you to eat this product because we're trying to sell you this product. So, there's an old saying, always follow the money. When it comes to where these policies are being influenced, if you look deep enough at the money, you'll find the answer. But animal meat isn't bad for you. Animal meat never has been bad for people. There's some people that do better eating more plant-based foods and less meat because they digest meat less effectively. And there's some people that do really well eating a lot of animal meat and it doesn't increase their risk. Again, I think the bottom line is that everyone's different, everyone's unique. And we should respect that. We should respect that we all have our own unique biochemistry. And we shouldn't demonize anyone for following what their body is trying to tell them to do. And I think what happens with a lot of these diet groups is they become almost dogmatic in their belief because that diet helps them. They think everybody should be on that diet. But I've been practicing over 20 years, and I've never seen a one-size-fits-all approach. The closest thing I've seen to one-size-fits-all is that, as a general rule of thumb, the grain grown today makes people sick, period. And a lot of people, upwards of 40% of the population is gluten sensitive. So a very large amount of people that develop autoimmune disease, and that's 1 in 7 in the US. So there's about 46 million of you in the US alone that have an autoimmune condition. We know gluten can contribute to autoimmunity. And so again, the number one thing I have seen pan out over and over and over and over again is that gluten sensitivity is a primary driver for autoimmune disease in our culture today. And if you take grain out of the diet, and this is where I think a lot of people going carnivore, a lot of people going paleo, with the fundamental, even the Atkins, the fundamental trend in all of those scenarios is that those individuals are cutting grain and gluten out of their diet. And so I generally see, both in my own experience clinically, but also in my observations and interactions with other colleagues, see that it's actually the gluten-free, grain-free aspect is leading the way for a lot of the improvements in autoimmune illnesses for people. Severe fatigue, apathy, low energy, weakness, disassociation, severe brain fog, blood work is normal. What could it be? A lot of things. Start with diet. Start with, do you have food sensitivities, food reactions? Look at your microbiome in your GI tract. Some people have yeast overgrowth that can mimic a lot of the symptoms you just described in their GI tracts, but also check your vitamin and mineral levels, because a lot of what you're describing also can sound like anemia. So B12 and iron deficiency, folate, copper deficiencies. So there's a number of things that could contribute to that slurry of symptoms. And so really, honestly, if you're not able to figure it out at home, kind of doing some modification with your diet and lifestyle, you need to really work with a functional practitioner who knows what they're doing. FSH is at 60. I'm 47. Can I bring periods back? Yes, you can. I've seen countless times. I've seen women who thought they were in early menopause bring their periods back. And one of the most profound diet changes I've seen do that is just going grain-free. Is sex good for health? Yes, absolutely. I mean, especially for men. Most men are, one of their primary needs is sex and human touch, and so it's very important for their mental and physical health. Not to say that it's not for women, but just speaking from a man's perspective, very important. How can I eat more protein if meat makes me constipated? You might try amino acids, broken down, so that meat is, for some, is a little bit more challenging to digest. So there's a couple of things that can be done if meat is constipating you. One, you can add betaine hydrochloride in and see if that helps you digest and break the meat down. Two, you could add like an apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of that before a meal, because it's a mild acid and can help you break it down. Three, you could take a digestive enzyme with different types of protease in it that could also help break that meat down and help you digest that meat. And number 4, you could take a free-form amino acid supplement. It's already broken down. There is no digestion that needs to occur with something like that. So those are all strategies you might try to implement in that regard. Should we be concerned about the kidneys for taking too much protein? Define what too much protein is. There's no real great research that says that eating protein damages the kidneys. All that research that was done early on never showed damage to the kidneys. It only showed that people with damaged kidneys had protein leakage. And so it's a guilt by association component. You don't, just because you have protein coming out in your urine doesn't mean that protein is damaging your kidneys. It means your kidneys are damaged and aren't holding on to protein adequately. And that's not the same thing. I've read on the internet from the FDA that wild rice also can contain arsenic. I only eat now sweet potato carbohydrate, but I like wild rice. But what do I do if arsenic is in it? Well, that's a good question. There's a lot of testing that's going on now. I think it's not so much that the wild rice contains the arsenic as it is that we're using a lot of chemicals to grow things. And so when we use the chemicals, the things like arsenic and cadmium and lead are showing up in the soil and staying in the soil, and then the plants that are growing in that soil are incorporating those toxic metals into them. And we're starting to see that play out more and more and more because we've abused how we grow things, and we've abused, a number of chemicals that do contain heavy metals. So I would say if you're looking for kind of a better option, look for an organic option that's grown in an organic soil. It's going to have potentially a much less of a risk factor involved with, having contaminant heavy metals in it. Dr. Osborne, could you please share some general recommendations to integrate your protein powder for teens, adults, women, and men? Let's see. I can't finish that question. It's from Gaia. Oh, that workout. Okay, so protein recommendations, how to integrate protein powders for teens, adults, men and women who work out. So recovery. It's not so much that you need to drink a protein drink right after a workout. That's somewhat been dispelled. A lot of people want to run home right away and get that protein in within an hour of the workout. That's not really necessary. It's quantitative protein in the course of your day to help you recover from the workout. If you're, depending on the level of workout that you're doing, again, you want to go on that higher end, 1.5, at least 1.5 to upwards of 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. With heavy workouts, especially if you're using heavier weights for your recovery. But it's not important to take it within 30 minutes of a routine or taking it before the routine. It's just important to get the total quantity in through the course of your day. And as far as how to integrate it, if you're trying to make a smoothie with it, we have in our book, No Grain, No Pain, I have my son, who is a gymnast, a competitive gymnast. We have his favorite smoothie recipe in the book. It's actually on page 260 in the book. It's called Cane's protein smoothie recipe, but it's just basically, it's got a mixture of different berries and things in it that you can use, and it tastes really good, and it'll give you 27 grams of complete protein per serving. Can we eat too much eggs in one day for protein? I mean, you can eat too much of anything in one day. I mean, it just depends on what you mean by too much. But generally speaking, you're not going to overdose on eggs. I mean, a lot of people fear eggs because of the whole cholesterol history. As a matter of fact, Mel, let's put the cholesterol myth video up below in the feed. Those of you who haven't heard me talk about cholesterol before, or maybe I'm talking about cholesterol and you're new and it's like freaking you out and you've never heard that high cholesterol is not a big deal, you need to check that video out. But don't fear the egg for the cholesterol. The eggs are great. The eggs are rich in lots of B vitamins. They're rich in choline, which is important. It's what we call a nootropic, so it helps your brain cognition. It helps support your brain function. It helps support your parasympathetic nervous system. It's actually, egg is one of the highest biologically valuable proteins you could consume, unless you're allergic to eggs. Now, if you're allergic to eggs or sensitive to eggs, it's a different matter. But So general rule of thumb, you're probably not going to overdose on eggs. I'll go periods because I have chickens at home. I'll go periods where I'll eat 6-8 eggs a day. I mean, just as a standard to get more protein in my diet, and then I'll get tired of eggs for a while and then I'll back off. But there's no real danger in eating a half dozen eggs a day or so in terms of fearing heart disease or cholesterol. If I'm deficient in tryptophan, how can this affect my health? Tryptophan is necessary in the regulatory pathway for serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that regulates gut motility and gut function, but also melatonin, which helps you regulate your sleep. So tryptophan is very important in that regard. Tryptophan actually is one of my favorite sleep aids. When other things don't work, like a lot of people will use valerian or magnesium or chamomile for sleep aids. Tryptophan is amazing. 1,000 milligrams of tryptophan 30 minutes before you go to bed at night can get you really good quality sleep and deep sleep. Hi, Dr. Osborne. Thank you for your sharing all your knowledge with us. I have recently tested positive to ANA and high smooth muscle actin. Last year's testing showed negative ANA. I got shingles in April, was on high doses of an antiviral for 2 weeks, going to retest in 2 months. If it hasn't resolved, then what would you recommend or even know? What can I do? Already gluten-free exercise, get at least 7 hours of sleep. So 6 things you should always be thinking about doing: the right diet, the right sleep, the right exercise, clean air, clean water, and sunshine. A lot of times when people get sick, sometimes when you get sick, like viral illnesses can trigger leaky gut and gut problems, and that can cause the development of acquired food sensitivities, which then can trigger autoantibodies to occur. So you might consider getting food sensitivity testing done as well if they don't normalize when you retest them. What about, not sure I understand your question, nutritional needs for someone who's morbidly obese? They're not very different. Nutritional needs of a morbidly obese person in terms of essential vitamins, minerals, are not really different than somebody who's not morbidly obese. I would just say that the people that are morbidly obese typically because of the sedentary behavior combined with an overconsumption of caloric energy. And so that, and a lot of times it's a psychological thing, because there's somebody in the household that's enabling that person, bringing that person extra food and making sure that person is glued to a chair or a bed and not getting up and doing their part. So there's a whole lot of dynamic to the morbid obese, but there's not a difference in their nutritional need. They still need key essential nutrients. So just generally they need more mobility and they need less food, and they need less enabling in their family members. Can too much animal protein cause Clostridium to overgrow? No. I mean, I've never seen that to be the case. And Clostridium, who says Clostridium is bad? I mean, there are different strains of Clostridium, Monica. So you've got what most people call C. diff, which is a bacteria that can be linked to ulcerative colitis, but not all Clostridium is C. diff. And so there are healthy versions of Clostridium as well. So, but no, you're not going to necessarily get an overgrowth of Clostridium as a result of the quantity of animal protein. I haven't seen that to be true, and I do thousands of microbiome tests a year in people who are on high protein diets. I'm deficient in magnesium and was given advice to take 400 milligrams. I assume you mean per day. It helps with my symptoms, but my pulse falls down into the 50s. 2 days without my symptoms get back. Any advice? Take calcium with it. Take a CalMag instead of just a pure magnesium. You might also consider taking vitamin B1 and vitamin D if your pulse is dropping too low. A lot of times, if that's what's happening, adding those other nutrients to support magnesium can help knock that out. You might also try just taking less magnesium. Typically, a therapeutic dose of magnesium is in the 600 to 1,000 milligram range, but some people are more sensitive to it than others. So if you're currently at 400, 300 might be a better option for you. If you're low in stomach acid, do you need HCl to break down protein powder? Yeah, you do. Protein powder still needs to be broken down, depending on the kind of protein powder. Now, if you're taking a pure free-form amino acid blend, not so much. But if you're using a protein powder, yes, because usually protein powders are proteins that have just been basically dehydrated and powderized, and so you still have to digest that and break it down. But amino acids are already broken down into their smallest common denominator. Mainstream talks about protein for skeletal muscle, but what about enzymes, blood cells, hormones, transporters, collagen, bones? I don't know if there's a question in that more than there's a comment. What can we do about protease inhibitors? Well, don't take them. I don't understand your question. Give me more context. How much protein should a 115-pound woman, 5'4", eat? Depends on the woman's activity level and depends on the woman's state of health. But if we're just talking about, I am 115 pounds, I'm 5'4", I'm at the weight I want to be, I'm at the muscle tone I want to be, and I want to continue to maintain that, and I exercise a reasonable amount per week, then you can probably get by with about 1.1 kilograms of protein per kilogram of body weight. So you take that 115 divided by 2.2, multiply that by 1.1, and that's going to give you approximate quantity of protein to eat per day to maintain your current status. That's to maintain your current status. But the nuance to how much protein do I need to eat, also falls into the category of, are you healthy or are you not healthy? Because people that are sick generally require more protein to dig out of the illness. What supplements would you suggest for short gut syndrome? You need to get tested. If you've got short gut syndrome, you need to get micronutrient tested, period. No ands or buts about it. That's, if you were my family member, I would make sure you were getting your micronutrients tested every 6 months for the rest of your life. And that goes for any of you that have short bowel syndrome or have had dissections, resections of your bowel. I mean, I had one time I had a guy 40 centimeters removed from his colon. You get these people with chronic inflammatory bowel disease where the solution is to rip parts of their bowels out so that part of the bowel is no longer inflamed, and then they're malnourished for the rest of their life. Or if your stomach is stapled, if you've had bariatric surgeries, you guys are at tremendous risk for vitamin and mineral deficiency for the rest of your life. And you should be getting your levels checked as a standard measure of maintaining your health, because it's not which supplements should a person with this issue take. It's what is having this issue look like? It looks like malabsorption and poor digestion. So it looks like an increased risk for nutritional deficiencies across the board, not just one kind of nutrient or a handful of kinds of nutrients, but all nutrients. So getting tested periodically is your best bet to understanding which things you need to consider supplementing on a regular basis. And we'll put a link, Kelly, for you to get quality intracellular nutrition analysis testing done, because that's what you really should be focusing on. Is it possible that eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is contributing to overall hair shedding? I feel better with higher protein and don't want to lower it, but I'm losing hair. There's a lot of reasons why you could lose hair, Jen. Zinc deficiency, iodine deficiency, your thyroid might be malfunctioning. You might also have problems with certain B vitamin deficiencies, particularly like biotin. I mean, there's just a lot of reasons a person can have hair thinning or can be losing hair. That has nothing to do with protein. So protein deficiency can contribute to hair loss. Too much protein generally doesn't contribute to hair loss, but other nutrients are probably what you need to have looked at. Can you get salt toxicity? Yeah, you can. Can you overeat protein? You can. For most people, overconsumption of animal proteins specifically is going to cause a severe constipation, and bowel flatulence and foul gas are common symptoms, early on symptoms and side effects, Stephanie. Is protein from beef bone broth better than whey? In my opinion, it is. because most of the whey protein is highly heat processed, and it's coming from cows that are not healthy. Is carnivore diet safe for the long term? Depends on the person. I think in my experience, I've seen people go 10 years out on carnivore and feel good and continue to feel good and do well. I've also seen people on a carnivore diet 2 years out develop severe malnourishment and develop other health issues. It's, again, you guys are asking me questions that are one size fits all type of answers that I can't give you. It's, every diet is unique to the person. And not everyone does well on super high protein. Not everybody does super well on super high carb. That's why you have two camps. Really, you have the, they got the vegan community, you got the carnivore community on both ends of the spectrum, and then you have everything in between, right? And so everyone's different. This is why I'm an advocate of testing. So many people are trying to figure out how to navigate how to eat in their diets. And step one is always pay attention to your body. Pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to how food makes you feel, and also keep in mind that just a good judgment and common sense. Are you eating enough? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping? Are you doing all the other right things that contribute to great health? And then from there, if you're still struggling in your health, now that's when you really seek to try to get some testing done that can give you some better insight as to where you may be doing it wrong for your needs. Why are they putting soybean in store mayonnaise? Because it's cheap. Soybean is cheap. And, they use soybean oil particularly to make the mayonnaise because it's easy. It's an industrial oil that is easy to make and super cheap to get a hold of. And so it reduces the overall product cost on the end of the manufacturer. And so they can then sell that product to you, lower cost to them, higher cost to you. I have malabsorption due to my pancreas. Are enzyme supplements enough, or how can I get enough protein in my case? Enzyme supplements are a great place to start if you've got pancreatic insufficiency, but you need to change your diet if you haven't already. Most people with pancreatic insufficiency are gluten sensitive. I see it all the time, where that gluten actually damages the pancreas and reduces the pancreatic enzyme output. What's your view of whey protein as a supplement in general? I think if you can get a cold pressed whey from an A2 type of cow, that's the right direction, but good luck finding that. Most of these whey protein powders are junk. Do they work for bodybuilders? Yeah, but bodybuilders are some of the most unhealthy people in the world. I mean, a lot of them do steroids, and it's build muscle at all costs. Because that's what the sport calls for. And I'm not trying to insult bodybuilders either. They're in a competitive sport trying to compete with other people, and that's just what it takes. But if you're trying to do this stuff healthy, then the processed whey proteins are just not something I recommend. Is sleep apnea be able to be addressed through nutrition? Yeah, through nutrition, diet, and lifestyle change. Ron, absolutely. We did a whole show, had a whole crash course on sleep, Ron, that you might check out. We'll put a link in the feed for you. I've been diagnosed with chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Been eating at inflammatory diet and on supplements. So maybe you mean I've been eating an anti-inflammatory diet and I'm on supplements. Exercise lightly. I see a functional medicine doctor. I have had horrible pain and I do notice a change. I had atrophy of muscles, so after changing diet, been having good changes. Good. Keep going. If you're feeling better, especially. Number one factor in chronic inflammatory response or biotoxin or mold toxin induced illness is you've got to get at the environment. You've got to fix the environment because so many people in mold don't get out of the mold. And then they go to doctors and the doctors give them supplement plans and diet change, but they don't get better because they're still in the environment that's making them sick. Do I digest protein? Oh, I do digest proteins, but having issues with more fatty, oily meats lying around my stomach for hours. What could be the cause of difficulty digesting higher amounts of fat? Your gallbladder, probably, possibly, your pancreas as well. So pancreatic enzymes for fat digestion. We have a product called Ultra Digest that's helpful in that regard. And then bile acids. We have a product called Lipogest that's helpful in that regard. You might also consider getting your nutrient status checked, because a lot of people that have vitamin C and taurine deficiencies, vitamin C and taurine are necessary to produce bile acid. So if you're deficient in those two nutrients, that could be the core. If we're talking about the kind of the root cause, that might be the root cause of your problem. I see a lot in carnivores people who try to go carnivore and do very poorly because the animal fat, they're taking in a lot more fat by eating only animal, and their bile production is compromised because they don't have enough vitamin C. And that one of the things about a carnivore diet is it's not super rich in vitamin C. And so some people going on that carnivore should think about supplementing with vitamin C to support their bile acid production. Protein intake effect on IGF-1 and how to decrease IGF-1, maybe some supplementation. I mean, I wouldn't look at an elevated IGF-1 as the end-all be-all danger marker for increased risk for the development of disease. I mean, I would look at a lot of other factors before I would look at IGF-1. For those of you that don't know, IGF-1 is insulin growth factor. Insulin-like growth factor 1. There are a lot of other greater issues that, if they coincide with IGF-1 elevations, become a problem. Things like homocysteine and C-reactive protein and erythrocyte sedimentation rate are all inflammatory markers that could be a problem. Making sure that your omega-3 status is normal and healthy, making sure your zinc and your chromium levels are adequate in that regard, because that's going to support that elevation in your IGF-1. What protein that affects my mom had on her memory? The question doesn't make sense. What protein that affects my mom had on her memory? We're gonna have to reword that question. I just can't make the meaning of it. How to know your protein intake is sufficient? So I mean, there's not a great test. So you could do, like a general test. A general blood test would be, for example, your serum protein levels. Your doctor can run your serum protein, your albumin, your globulin, etc. Although that test is a broad test, it's a good place to start. If it's super low, you definitely know you're protein malnourished. But most people are not going to see tremendous fluctuation in that type of test. So a better way, in my opinion, to test insufficient intake is to actually measure your amino acids. And that's a far better way to analyze whether or not you're getting what you need in terms of your protein intake. If you have gut dysfunction, can you not absorb protein efficiently even though you're getting proper amounts? It depends on the type of gut dysfunction. I mean, if your stomach acid is being blocked or hindered, then that's going to affect your protein absorption. If your intestines are inflamed, it's going to affect your ability to absorb efficiently, but it's not going to stop you from absorbing. It's not all or none. A lot of people think I have a gut dysfunction, therefore I have no absorption. It's not all or none. You might have gut dysfunction, and so it may reduce the efficiency of digestion and absorption, but it's not just gonna totally make it go away. What do vertical ridges on fingernails mean? Not much. We see vertical ridging as people age because the growth rates of fingernails can slow down, and so that vertical ridging is actually pulling of collagen fibers overlapping one another, and so it creates a vertical ridging appearance, but it's not really a sign of anything deleterious, Sabrina. Your molybdenum course video was a game changer. I was not able to tolerate egg proteins because of the sulfites. Having taken molybdenum, I can now eat eggs without issues. That's fantastic to hear. Dark vertical line in the fingernails typically is an indicator of liver damage, or can be, not always, but it absolutely can mean. It's what we call a splinter hemorrhage, right? That dark vertical line. And so that's an indicator oftentimes of liver damage. So you might just go to your doctor and ask him to do an ultrasound of your abdomen and your liver and see that your liver's doing okay. You might have him run a test called an AST, ALT, GGT, and ALK-Phos. Those tests help to assess the liver overall in the blood. I've been tested copper deficient in an intracellular test, but my ceruloplasmin is normal, but not high. Does this mean a copper deficiency? Yeah, your copper and your intracellular copper levels are low, so that definitely means deficiency. I did a Viome test and was told to avoid choline and glucosinolates. I'm now trying to follow the no grain, no pain diet. What in blood work or poop would make the decision to avoid choline? Nothing, Judy. The Viome test telling you to avoid those things, in my opinion, is junk science. They try. This is just my opinion. It's not a test I'm a fan of. I've seen so many people spend hundreds of dollars getting that test done, and then applying, the information in their diet and lifestyle, and not moving the needle at all in their health. In other words, I've not seen any clinical outcome validity for that test being very fruitful or helpful for anyone I've ever seen who have done it. So it's not something I would use, and it's not something I would put a whole lot of weight on. Are oats really bad food for many reasons, and if so, why? You need to go back and watch my crash course on oats. We'll put a link up for you. If you're gluten sensitive, oats are not good. If you struggle with blood sugar problems, oats aren't really all that great for you. It's a super high glycemic driver. But more importantly, avenin and oats, if you're gluten sensitive, will drive the inflammatory cascade. Yeah, somebody's asking me if I've heard about the discovery on healing autoimmune disease from 2 researchers at Northwestern. Yeah, there's no healing for autoimmune disease. Never going to be a drug treatment for autoimmune disease that actually heals it. There'll be plenty of ways to suppress the immune system to reduce the symptoms, but there's not going to be any ways to heal it, including stem cell research, which I'm not opposed to stem cells or stem cell research. I'm just opposed to enabling people to continue to cause self-harm, and then giving the solution of just fix it with stem cells and do that every 5 years and keep abusing yourself with poor diet and poor lifestyle choices. I think you have to address the diet and the lifestyle choices. If you want to also do things like stem cell, that's great, but don't rely on medical intervention therapeutics to compensate for horrible choices and destroying yourself voluntarily. Yeah, if you've tried doing liver cleanses with high dose olive oil, and it makes you nauseous, you probably have a gallbladder problem, and so you really should have your nutrition status checked to make sure that you are nutritionally adequate, and especially in, like I mentioned earlier, vitamin C and taurine, because those are necessary for you to be able to properly produce bile acids. What's a grass finished animal? Yeah, grass finished cow, bison, any kind of wild game. Typically, wild game are grass finished because they were never grain fed. The grass finished just means that you take, when cows are out on pasture, a lot of times when they're getting ready to take the cow to market, they will finish them up on grain. So they'll fatten them up with a bunch of grain before they ship them out to market to slaughter. Grass finished means they don't do that. They finish them out on grass. And so you don't get all that toxic grain and the diet of the cow, affecting the quality of the meat. Because when you grain feed a cow, the meat, the vitamin and the fat content of the meat changes. You get less vitamin A, less vitamin E, less conjugated or CLA. You get less of that type of fat, and you get more omega-6 and less omega-3 in the fat of the cow. And that's where, when we think about animal meats being contributory to heart disease, it's not grass-fed, grass-finished animal meats. It's the nonsense that they're trying to sell us in mass production farming. My autistic son has I wouldn't put too much weight in HbA VMA ratios. Those change daily, and so I just wouldn't put too much weight in those types of tests that measure that. Is fibromyalgia an autoimmune condition? It depends on whether or not your fibromyalgia was adequately diagnosed. In my opinion, fibromyalgia is an esoteric, subjective diagnosis. It's improperly diagnosed the vast majority of cases that I've ever seen, where doctor just doesn't know what to do with somebody who has chronic achiness and pain in their muscles, and so they just get stamped with fibromyalgia. But fibromyalgia technically is a pain perception problem. It's a neurological disease where a person's ability to comprehend pain and neurologically speaking is altered, and so we generally see in fibromyalgia it can be autoimmune, but it's a lot of times it's a mold toxin induced illness, or it's a food toxin induced illness. See it a lot with gluten sensitivity. You see it a lot in people that have been are still in mold. Does being on birth control make it harder for my body to absorb the protein and utilize it? No, being on birth control, though, does contribute to B vitamin, zinc deficiency, magnesium deficiency. There's some research that shows that birth control increases the risk of stroke and certain types of cancers. So, there's definitely side effects to being on birth control, but to my knowledge, it doesn't directly impact your body's ability to get protein. Is a diet high in good quality animal fat and animal protein bad for me? I have high cholesterol, defined high cholesterol, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and I feel like my PCP is stuck in the 1980s when he keeps telling me to eat a low-fat diet. He is stuck in the 1980s. It's terrible advice. But what's good for you is it's relative. I don't know what's good for you. I don't know you, and I haven't tested you, and so it's hard for me to say, what kind of diet should you stick to. I say start by listening to your own intuition and listening to how your body is communicating to you. If that, higher fat animal diet you feel fantastic on, then you're probably on the right track, regardless of what any doctor tells you. Look, this is one thing. Don't ever let a doctor tell you, especially if you feel good, don't ever let a doctor tell you that you should change your diet to something else because he said so. And this is especially true if he's basing it on some lab tests. If you're going in and you're just getting a general checkup and he says your cholesterol is too high, you need to eat low fat, but you feel fantastic, the doctor's wrong. Your body's right. Especially if you follow the doctor's advice and start feeling bad. I get this all the time. People come to me and say, my other doctor said that I should eat gluten and that I'm not gluten sensitive. And so I've been eating gluten because I need to get my fiber. And by eating gluten, their bowels are inflamed and their joints hurt and they feel like garbage. But because their doctor told them to do that, they were hell-bent on not listening to their own body. Never outsource what your body is telling you or trying to communicate to you to the opinion of someone else who doesn't live in your body and doesn't experience what you experience. Let's see. White says, how can I get a hold of your office? And put our phone number up in there for White. I like dried dates and figs. Can we eat them after a meal? Sure. I mean, there's nothing wrong with either one of those foods. Could you potentially overdo them? Yeah, but you could potentially overdo a lot of foods, but inherently nothing wrong with them unless you're reactive or allergic. Sister got diagnosed with unknown autoimmunity. all of a sudden high ANA. She also has high levels of IgG4 antibodies. If she caught Rona years ago, but continues to get the jabs, could that cause it? Yeah, it can. And there's now validated research that's showing that. There's been a number of published studies. You can even go, I know many of you have lost your hope and faith and trust in the FDA and in the National Institute of Health and in the other organizations that are designed to be there to protect and safeguard our healths and understand what causes illness. But even now today, we're seeing a lot of peer-reviewed published data coming out on autoimmunity being induced as a result of the Rona combined and also with the pokes. Macros. So question about morbid obesity. I'm inquiring about macros for morbid obese person with zero activity level. It's really hard to calculate a macro. Where you would start would be to first calculate what they're actually eating, Sabrina. So start first by just collecting 7 days of data on macro, but also taking the historical weight. So I don't know if this person that's morbidly obese has got a historical weight where they've weighed once a month or weighed, periodically, but you've got to start with that data collection first before you can calculate macros. Because the problem with macros is, you can make an attempt at calculation, and there are BMR calculators, body metabolic rate calculators that you can use even for morbidly obese people. It'll give you a general calorie intake recommendation. But I find that a lot of those are misleading and not accurate. And so knowing the person's weight over a period of time combined with knowing their daily intake of caloric energy over a period of time gives you a starting point and gives you an objective starting point. And by that, and once you have that in place, now you can, with the goal of weight loss in mind, you can now start manipulating the macros accordingly. That to just come out with a macro, the best way to go about doing that would be to first calculate a person's basic metabolic rate or their BMR. And if you go online and just type in BMR calculator, you'll be able to pull up a number of resources where you can, there are a couple of different equations that have been created in the medical research to help calculate what somebody's metabolic rate is at rest or in a sedentary situation. And you can get a good idea for quantitative calorie consumption for a morbidly obese person. And then from there, you can say, okay, we need to eat less than this if we're going to plan on losing weight. Let's see here. I have been experiencing B12 deficiency neuropathy symptoms. B12 was 250. Doc said I was fine. I tried supplementing B12 and my symptoms went away. Now my ferritin is low. What to do? Well, ferritin is an indicator of iron storage. And so you may need iron, you may not. It just depends. You should also get an iron panel done and have some other nutritional variable factors looked at, Lucy. There's nothing you should do specifically just based on your ferritin being a 10. Work with a doctor who understands nutrition would be the best thing you could do. What's your overall view of proteins? The science we know about them, how much they do for us, how much do we know about them? I think, my overall view is that protein is an essential nutrient that humans can't survive without. And animal protein is the most comprehensive, complete type of protein. But if you subcategorize proteins, there's amino acids, and then there's what are called polypeptides and peptides. And the peptide science is it's in its infancy. We're learning so much about different chains of amino acids and different lengths of amino acids having different physiological, biological effects. And we're just barely getting started scratching the surface. Do you have a test on your site that can test for what foods are good and not good for you to eat? Yeah, I have one called it's called the LRA, lymphocyte response assay, and it's a food sensitivity test that can help you understand which foods your immune system doesn't like. Can we put a link up for that?
I just did.
Okay, perfect. How many of you have totally lost trust in the medical system? I can see in a lot of commentary about, about pokes and about trust. Just curious, how many of you feel like the system has failed you, and that a lot of times we're kind of forced to say the FDA has these rules around nutrition. You can't make any claims about nutrition treating, curing, or diagnosing any type of medical condition because it's that's all owned lock, stock, and barrel by, in my opinion, by the pharmaceutical industry and their undue influence on our government and on our agencies, on our governing bodies that regulate licenses of doctors. But when we commonly say, ask your doctor if something is right for you, or you should go back to your doctor and talk to your doctor about, running this test around nutrition or that test around nutrition. But I know from your end, it's probably pretty frustrating because the average doctor doesn't train in nutrition, and so they really don't know anything. And so when you are being told to go back and ask your doctor about nutrition and they don't know anything, then you're at a dead end. Anyway, let's scroll down just a little bit. How to lose weight after mold exposure? That's a really good question. That took me 2 years to restore my physical health after mold exposure. If you're out of the mold and you're certain you're out of the mold, and your health is relatively good and it's back, depending on what kind of mold you were in. But one of the mold toxins that we know can contribute to weight challenges is one called zearalenone, or Zea for short. And if you have elevations of that, it's an estrogen mimicking mycotoxin, and it can really disrupt your ability to lose weight, hormonally speaking. So you might consider having that measured. You might also consider DIM, DIM. We have something called Ultra DIM as a means to kind of help metabolize some of that out of you as well. You might also consider starting a macro count. I don't know if you've done that before, but a lot of times too, we'll see people struggle with weight loss and their macros are off, and they don't have any objective macro data to understand how to adjust it. So start with counting. Do a 7-day diet history. You can use any number of apps that count your macros or count your total calories in the day, and keep in mind that 3,500 calories is equal to 1 pound of fat. And so to lose weight successfully, you have to have a 500 calorie per day deficit. And it's not that you starve yourself by eating 500 calories less, but you have to combine using more energy through exercise with some degree of caloric restriction to achieve a level of weight loss, provided that your hormones are balanced and you're capable of having that weight loss. Okay. Thoughts on parasites and ivermectin? I think ivermectin's fantastic, depending on the kind of parasite. But it's, ivermectin is one of the top medicines in the world, one of the top critical medicines in the world. Very safe. I know it was touted as a horse dewormer and everything else, by the powers that be that wanted everybody to do something else. But it's fantastic medication, ivermectin. Is the whey in protein shakes good quality if you remove all the other garbage in it? I mean, it depends on the source of the whey, Daniel. There are different qualities in whey. And so whey in and of itself can be a great source of protein if the cow was fed appropriately and the whey was extracted from the dairy product appropriately without all the chemical processing. What kind of damage can celiac have long after someone has stopped getting exposed? So it just depends on what kind of diet you're following. Most celiacs that I meet are still eating gluten and don't even know it. If you haven't read No Grain, No Pain, you need to. It might change your life. 92% of celiacs going on the traditional gluten-free diet have a failure to achieve a reduction of inflammation or an absence of villus atrophy. So in other words, they continue to be sick, despite the fact that they're on the diet for up to 5 years, as some of the research has shown. And there are several reasons why that happens, but one of the biggest reasons is the myth that you can eat corn and rice and oats on a gluten-free diet and be gluten-free. And if that's new news to you, read No Grain, No Pain and check out our Glutenology Masterclass. It's free. Glutenology.net/registration. You can sign up for that class. It's 14 hours long. It's absolutely free to you, but it's life-changing and life-saving information that if you're not aware of, you should be. Is Fusarium mold toxic? Yeah, Fusarium is what produces Zea. It's one of the molds that produce an estrogen-mimicking mycotoxin. Is it toxic? Absolutely. Do you still see clients in person, and do you do mold testing? Yes to both. Question about the carnivore diet. I did a whole show on carnivore. You can check that out on my channel. Just type in carnivore and watch the crash course on it. Okay, I think we're out. It's 1:50. We're 20 over. So let's call it a day. If you're new to the show, can we link up the Glutenology Masterclass link? A couple of people asking for that. Look, if you're new to the show, welcome. All are welcome here. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. If you found value or learned something new today, chime in. Let me know. Let me know it was helpful to you. Also, make sure you share this with someone that you care about. Share the show. We're here live every Thursday, 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, to take your questions. Whatever question you have, we're here to try to help you along your endeavor to better health. You can also go to visit me at glutenfreesociety.org and sign up there for our newsletter. It's free. We'll send you a ton of information on how to overcome and how to navigate great health and how to overcome autoimmune disease with diet and lifestyle changes. You can also take advantage of some of our other resources at Gluten Free Society. We offer over 100 different products, including high quality pharmaceutical grade supplements that are gluten free. We also offer a number of different lab testing services for nutritional deficiencies, food sensitivities, and genetics for gluten sensitivity. So if you haven't taken advantage of those and you're looking to try to learn more about how to navigate what you should do nutritionally, those are resources that you should check out and definitely consider using. Thanks again for your support. We'll see you on Tuesday night for another Dr. Osborne Zone, and I'll see you back here next Thursday for another live Q&A. Have a fantastic weekend, and take care.